And on today's show, we are joined by Bobby Blanco from MASN Sports. And obviously, we're going to talk about this Marlins series at hand. But of course, we're going to take a little dive into some minor league baseball as Dylan Cruz may be off to a little bit of a slow start here in AA.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And of course, this is Locked On Nationals, and I'm your host, Ryan Clary. And on today's show, we are joined by Bobby Blanco from MASN Sports. Bobby, how are we doing today, my friend?
I'm great, Ryan. How are you? This is good. This is fun talking to you longer than like a 5-minute segment on the radio.
Yeah. Bobby is a regular guest over on Grant and Danny here. And as of today as well, I will be hitting him up to see if he can come on the show today. He just doesn't know that yet.
Anytime. I'm more than happy to do it.
All right. Later on in today's show, we will be getting up to speed with Dylan Cruz, as he has had a little bit of a slow start in AA, but still early on in the season. And also as well, he did get hit in the head with a little off-speed pitch, but glad to see he was back in the lineup in yesterday's contest. But also, we're going to take a look into 2024 as well. As the Nationals, I mean, let's be honest, they've kind of superseded the expectations for 2023. 2024 is going to have some pretty lofty expectations for this team just from the steps that they have taken so far. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But of course, let's start with yesterday's game, Bobby, because it really wasn't the best game in the world, considering you're losing 6-1 against the Marlins. And in that contest, you only had 3 hits. So just kind of what went wrong with the Nationals yesterday.
Yeah, I think this offense is kind of in a lull right now. David Martinez mentioned that they're a little worn down from that 9-game 4-city road trip, starting with the Little League Classic in Williamsport, 11 days ago. So they're feeling that road trip a little bit. I think this offense is only going to go as far as the top of the lineup takes them. And no Lane Thomas yesterday. He was subbed out of Wednesday's finale in Toronto with some stiffness in his back. And Davey mentioned that's part of the problem with playing on turf for 3 days when you're not used to it, is that you kind of it hurts your joints, hurts your back, not as giving as natural grass. So he sits last night too. And then, you look at the bottom. I mean, it's exciting to have guys like Jacob Young play at the bottom of the lineup, but, they're just not as experienced, right, at the major league level yet. So they're still kind of figuring it out as they go. It's only like Jacob Young's, third game. So if it's not C.J. Abrams, Lane Thomas, Joey Meneses, Keibert Ruiz at the top of the lineup, this offense is going to be pretty stagnant and, dare I say, even a little boring. It would take something really special from those young guys I just mentioned at the bottom half. We saw Riley Adams play a couple of times with Keibert Ruiz because he's been having a really strong season, but he's now in a slump. Like, he hasn't been hitting very well over his last couple of outings over the last week or so. So, yeah, if it's not those top 4 guys, and if guys like Lane Thomas sit, this offense is going to struggle. And, I think aside from that 3-run home run in the 5th, Yoan Adon gave them a chance. He was a little wild, but I think, you're entering the 5th only down 2-0. That's not terrible. I don't think Adon loses this game for them. I think it's more the lack of offense. That 3-run home run obviously didn't help, and then they add one extra one in the 9th, the Marlins. So, but yeah, this offense is kind of stagnant right now, and hopefully they get Lane back tonight, and hopefully that it can find some momentum going this weekend and end up at least splitting the series with the Marlins.
Yeah, in the first half of the season, Bobby, I mean, you covered this team. Like, you know what it's like. I mean, Lane Thomas was kind of the guy in the offense. And if Lane Thomas wasn't going to have a good night, then the Nationals were probably going to lose that game because they just simply weren't going to put up runs on the board. So as of recent, and especially with Lane Thomas out of the lineup yesterday, you kind of see that production fall off, in which what we have seen as of recent with this Nationals team. It's not just Lane Thomas getting it done. Lane Thomas has been kind of slumping over here in the second half of the season. He just hasn't really been his usual self, at least from what we have seen in 2023. But I think the best thing about this Nationals team up to the point of this season is that you have seen CJ Abrams step up to the plate and hit big home runs, maybe late in games or whatever it may be. Joey Meneses, obviously, Keibert Ruiz as well. Riley Adams even has a little piece of that. So I think when I looked at the Nationals in the first half of the season and kind of comparing them to now, I was kind of shocked considering the turnaround that this offense has had, especially as of recent, like over the last month and a half or so. But now we're into September. You're going to have a lot of young guys here. Carter Keyboom's up in the bigs. I mean, he's starting to have a little bit of an impact. He's been making some moves and waves up in the majors. But other than that, I mean, what do you kind of want to see from these young guys moving forward with this season?
Yeah, I want to see him finish the season strong. You mentioned all those guys like CJ Lane, Joey, and Carter. Even Carter was like batting like fourth or fifth last night.
Yeah.
So if I know that technically they're not out of it. They're currently 8.5 games out of a wild card spot. That's a little lofty. For what, like 30, not even less than 30 games left in the season. There's a handful of teams ahead of them that are just better, that they're gonna play for a wild card spot. But yeah, you want to see these young guys finish strong. You mentioned Lane Thomas, see him bounce back. Hopefully this back issue is gone by today. He can kind of put that behind him and have a strong September. CJ Abrams has been great at the top of the lineup. I mean, he's been your prototypical leadoff hitter, getting on base at almost a 300 clip. Extra base hits, stealing bases. He's one of the best base stealers in the game right now. He's on pace to like break Trey Turner's single season record for the Nationals. And then Joey, I mean, I know the power numbers aren't there for Joey. He hasn't had as many home runs as we saw this part of last season. He hit a really fly ball last night, but with a wind incoming from center field and a little chillier than normal for, late August, it just died at the warning track. But I still think Joey is still getting better and more comfortable at the plate and, getting good swings. I know they're not flying out the ballpark, but I still think is the team leader in RBIs. So guys getting on base, Lane, CJ ahead of him, guys like Joey, Keibert driving them in. I'm not looking too much for power from these guys. I'm just looking for good at bats and scoring when the opportunity presents itself. Earlier on the season, this is one of the worst teams as runners in scoring position. They've done a lot better in the second half of getting guys on base, a la CJ, a la Lane, and then driving them in. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they can continue to do that. And then the guys at the bottom half of the lineup, can Jacob Young, can Jake Alou prove that they are, close to major league ready? I'm not looking for them to, set the world on fire, but drive it. Like Jake Alou had a great at bat in Miami on Saturday, drove in the go-ahead run or tying run, I believe, in the ninth inning in that rally. So can he continue to put at bats like that? Can Jacob Young come up clutch at some point? Just kind of flashes like that, just to kind of show that, hey, we can be a part of this. They don't have the superstar pedigree that some of the guys on this roster and coming up in the minors have, but they can definitely be contributors. Can they show that they can do that moving forward? That's what I'm looking for this last month.
Yeah, and with Jacob Young, you mentioned him a lot there, and I've actually really liked what Jacob Young has done so far. I mean, obviously, he's made those two really nice plays in center field there, getting Alejandro Kirk at home. I mean, it's not like he's the fastest guy in the world,
right,
but it was still a great play.
Still need to make the throw.
350 feet from dead center. I mean, he got him. He nailed him. It was a perfect throw on the line. Just beautiful. And obviously the web gem up in Toronto as well. And now he's got 2 doubles to his repertoire as well. The bat's starting to come in there. He's drawing some walks. He's a scrappy guy, man. What do you make of Jacob Young so far?
Yeah, I was talking with Dan Coco on the broadcast last week, and I attribute him. He doesn't have the power of an Adam Eaton, but he has that kind of mentality or like that pedigree or that profile that Adam Eaton brought to that championship team. Scrappy guy. He's maybe not going to be a starter, but he could be a really good fourth outfielder, guy that you can plug in as a defensive replacement, pinch runner, give a guy a break and still produce offensively. I mean, he hit 300 wherever he went in the minor league system, 300 or better. He's basically a 300 hitter by the course of the minor league system. I know he only played like 8 games at AAA Rochester. I don't think it was 8. I think it was like 4 at AAA Rochester. But still, I mean, he just proves that he can put the bat on the ball wherever he goes. If he continues to do that at the major league level, there's a place for a guy like that on a winning club. Like if the Nationals are going to have a winning team next year or the year after, you need guys like Jacob Young to contribute. And, Davey always says it takes all 26 guys, it's all 28 now in September. And Jacob Young can definitely fill that role. Knock on wood, someone gets hurt, he can fill that role and play every day. He can play all three outfield positions. You saw what he did in center field. He's actually made 3 nice plays in center field. He made a diving catch in Miami too. So yeah, I think he just has that kind of Adam Eaton scrappiness to him. I know Adam was, your leadoff hitter for a championship club and starting right fielder. He's not going to be that, I don't think, but he could still have that get on base guy, steal bags, play solid defense. Maybe not have the pop that Adam had, but just that kind of scrappy profile I really like about Jacob Young.
Yeah, I've seen all the same things with Young, and really we'll get into them here a little bit more. But with Jacob Young, just to kind of wrap up this instant conversation here, but Jacob Young, he does remind me a little bit of Adam Eaton. I've seen that kind of thrown out a lot recently. Like, the guy can just do everything a little bit well. He's not going to hit for power, especially not the power that Eaton kind of showed through the duration of his career. At least he had a moment of power. Obviously, it wasn't there for his entire career. But that's certainly something that Jacob Young could develop down the line. Am I expecting that? Probably not. But I think of this guy like bases loaded, bottom of the 9th inning, you're down by 1 run, 2 outs. Who do you want at third base? You want Jacob Young there. Like, you want your speedy guys there. And so in situational baseball like that, that's where I see Jacob Young kind of sticking out. That's where I could kind of see him kind of finding his role and stepping into that and being really good at it as well. But We'll talk about the 2024 Nationals here, because I think 2024 is going to be really interesting, Bobby. But before we get into that, let me tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And guys, get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And now we get back into it with MASN's own Bobby Blanco. And Bobby, this season in 2023, this may be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing. The good thing is the Nationals, they've showed a ton of promise. They've showed a ton of promise with the young guys. Lane Thomas has developed into a big league player as well. Joey Meneses has been pretty steady and consistent all season long. Contact rate is good. Everything you really want to see has been checking out. CJ Abrams taking the step up. Keibert Ruiz, Josiah Gray being an all-star. Mackenzie Gore showing signs of being an ace. There's a lot of young promise on this team, which leads me to then think this Nationals team could be knocking on the door of a postseason run in 2024. First and foremost, let me just get your thoughts on that right then and there.
I think so. We talked earlier about what we're looking for at the end of this season, and with a month left to play, I think the main thing I'm looking, the development of all those guys you just mentioned is obviously super important, but what their final record is going to be this year is going to be the baseline for next year, right? Like, every year we're expecting them to get better and better and better. And they're on pace to win almost 20 more games this year than they did last year. They're on pace to win 74, 75 games when they won 55 last year. So I think if you take that kind of rate, I don't think they're going to jump up to win 90 next year, but they can get into the 80s probably. I would say 500 is probably what you're aiming for, if not above 500. It's going to be tough. If you look at the wild card standings right now, especially in the National League, there are a couple teams still in it that are just barely hovering above 500. So if you kind of finished in that range, I guess you would have a shot. It remains to be seen what happens. The offseason and everything, we know that. But I don't think the playoffs are an unrealistic aspiration next year. And I keep thinking about this yesterday. Davey said this off the cuff. He was asked about, how does he balance Josiah Gray, who you just mentioned, Mackenzie Gore, who you just mentioned, those two guys specifically. How does he balance their development this year and pushing them while also gearing up for next year? And try to make them better for 2024. And he off the cuff just said that he feels like they're going to be really, really good next year. So they already believe that next year the playoffs. There's already been some talk, at least amongst them, of next year is the playoff year that they can make a run at this. I keep comparing this team, and this is easy for me, obviously, because who I work for. I grew up following the Orioles. I still follow the Orioles. And, these two teams are just recently going through these big rebuilds. I think for me, it's an easy comparison. You look at the 2021 Orioles, who won 52 games, finished last in the league. Last year, they jumped up to 83 games. That's a above 30-game difference. I'm not expecting that from the Nationals this year, but, bear with me here. They missed the wild card by 3 games. And then they also had 3 teams from their division. So a tough division for the American League East make the playoffs last year. So that kind of hurt the Orioles. And then now they have the best record in the American League, and they're going to probably be the 1 seed in the playoffs. You look at the Nats timeline right now, that kind of matches up. I mean, they can take, no one expected the Orioles to make that jump last year. No one expected the Nationals to make this jump this year. So if the Orioles came into this year expecting playoffs, and here they are, I'm not saying the Nationals are going to win the division, but the Orioles came into this year of their rebuild expecting playoffs. I think that kind of matches up with the Nationals going into next year expecting playoffs.
Yeah, and that's honestly a really good comparison as well, because I've always kind of thought of this as like in all realness, back before the season even started, I kind of thought this would be like the 2010 season for the Washington Nationals, where they're about to be going into an off season where they could be spending on someone like a Jason Worth, like that kind of caliber of a player. And then obviously 2011, the Nationals, they're hovering around 500. They get hot in the second half, look really good. 2012, they went on, win the division. Bryce Harper comes up. And now going into next season, you're seeing Dylan Cruz and James Wood, 2 blue chip prospects, 2 top 7 prospects in all of baseball, who could be making their major league trek here probably at any moment in 2024. So it kind of has that similarities now to where we're actually in the 2011 season, and that in 2012, meaning 2024, right, we will be taking kind of that next step, and it's going to be a big step. But when you look around the National League East, like I totally expect the New York Mets to not be as bad as this year. Like, obviously, they're not probably going to spend as they have in the past, but I still think they have a good core group of guys. And they also have the farm system now that could possibly help them as well. And even then, the Atlanta Braves are still here. I'm not really buying too much into the Miami Marlins as we sit here today. It's easy to say now as they've kind of fallen off here and they're in town here in D.C., but I just don't think they have the support there. I don't think they'll be able to keep some of the guys who will be free agents. I don't think they have the farm system to really kind of help support your young core of group up in the big leagues. But I think the Nationals, like, I'm starting to kind of talk myself into them being a postseason team in 2024. But when looking ahead, like, we all know pitching is important, Bobby, when it comes to postseason baseball. If you don't have the pitching, you're not going to make a run. We learned that well back in 2016 and 2014. Name the years where we just didn't have enough pitching. We didn't have the bullpen. 2019, it all clicked. So going forward, this has kind of been a hot button topic here as of recent. I've kind of discussed this a lot. Jake Irvin, Josiah Gray, Mackenzie Gore, all who have really been impressive so far. Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin, their first seasons here with the Nationals. What do you kind of make of the, not rumors, there's no real rumors about it, but there is some speculation going around about shutting them down for the rest of the month? Kind of just what are your general thoughts on them being potentially shut down? Should they? Will they? Whatever you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really speculation or rumors. Like, the Nationals are openly having these conversations, and, we're obviously not behind those doors when they're having them, but they've told us, like, yeah, this is under consideration. I know for a fact what they don't want to do is shut them down completely. That I know they ended up having to do that with Josiah Gray at the end of last year. He probably could have made 1, maybe even 2 more starts. I think it was just 1. At the end of last year, they decided to skip it and shut him down. I know they would prefer not to do that with any of these guys. They see value in them finishing the season through the end of September, that first weekend of October, on a natural 4-day rest plan, whatever it may be. Hopefully the 6-man rotation sticks. Because you already got Josiah Gray. He's only like 10 innings away from matching his career high from last year. So you're thinking he's on pace to make, Davey Martinez always talks about, I think it's like they look for like 15 or 20% increases year by year in terms of innings pitched for these guys. So that would probably, Josiah finished with a little under 150 last year. That'll probably put him around 165, 170 ish.
Yeah.
If everything goes well, they even considered, he had a really bad August. Josiah Gray did, so they even considered maybe skipping his start on Sunday against the Marlins, and just kind of giving him a reset after a bad month. He only lasted 2 innings on Monday in Toronto.
And he threw that bullpen yesterday, right? And that was kind of the deciding factor. We were like, all right, we won't shut him down now.
And Davies always said, what they look for is a drop in mechanics. And Josiah Gray has had a drop in mechanics recently. And he said his bullpen was great. Changeup was great. Fastball was good. He was finishing straight to the plate. It's easy when you see Josiah Gray. When he is wrong, he's usually finishing open wide and finishing towards the first baseline. So I think they're definitely having this conversation. They want these guys to finish, and they kind of have safeguards in place to help them along the way. Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin are both coming off injury, so they're going to be super careful with those guys. Jake Irvin, of course, has never pitched this much, nonetheless, in the major leagues. So you have to be cautious with this guy. Now, here's what I do know, which will help. We got Thaddeus Ward being stretched out as a starter on the IL. He threw a bullpen yesterday. He's scheduled to pitch again Tuesday. With the expanded roster, you figure at some point he would come up and make a spot start, giving one of these guys a break. I also know that Jake Irvin is on the same pitch day as top prospect Jackson Rutledge at AAA. Now, I know Jackson's numbers at AAA Rochester aren't great, but the fact that he even made the AAA this year and has been able to stick there is a good sign for the former first-round pick that he is progressing better. He is putting those injuries behind him. You could bring him up and you can have him make a start or two up here and give Jake a day off or extra rest if needed, because Jackson still has to pitch his innings too. What does it matter at this point if it's a AAA or the major leagues? So I think that those are those safeguards in place that they're going to be prepared to give these guys an extra day of rest to ensure that they finish all things considered, that they're healthy, but finish the season normally, because they want to be able to do that next year with that same kind of 15-20% increase, knowing that these guys are going to be very important to their potential playoff push.
Yeah, and where I stand on that is like, I kind of echo what your sentiment was that I wouldn't shut them down unless they really needed to be shut down. Like if Jake Irvin, for example, just throwing an example out there, if he's like, hey, like I'm feeling a little sore today, no problem.
Any kind of injury,
skip your start. Josiah Gray, any of them, skip a start. We're not going in the postseason this year. We understand that. We're 8.5 games back. Yes, there is still a chance, Nats fan. I know. I hear you guys too. But we're not. We're just not making a run at this moment. The future is our priority. And speaking of the future, Bobby, you got to sit down with Dylan Cruz here the other day. So that a few weeks now. But I want to get to Dylan Cruz after this. And we're joined by Bobby Blanco with MASNsports.com. And the Nationals, of course, play the Marlins tonight at 7:05 Eastern Time. You can catch every pitch in the Nationals' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Nationals there. And Bobby, you did get to sit down with Dylan Cruz back when he was in Fredericksburg. And first and foremost, I watched the entire thing. Very cool interview. But what was kind of like the general vibe that you got from Dylan Cruz? Because what I get from him is that I don't really think he knows that he's this huge big-time prospect yet. He just doesn't really get that vibe.
I think he knows. I think he's just been, how do I put this nicely? Like he's used to it. I don't want to say he's been trained, but like if you think about it, and this is not a shot against him, but he was at a top program at LSU, obviously national champion, player of the year. So he's used to the media attention, I think. And his agent, Scott Boras, I am sure has given him some media training at some point of how to handle the media, how to present yourself. So like we've seen it as far back as Bryce Harper, right? Like a young Bryce Harper. To me, Dylan is just like, off camera, just a 21-year-old kid. I mean, he's just a dude. Like, he's hanging out. He's super nice, likes to joke around. He's having fun. Like, I think he gets it, like, in terms of, like, he understands how big of a deal he is. Like, I think that he understands and he knows how much pressure's on him, and he embraces it, which is a good thing, right? Like, he is not shying away from that spotlight. He is not shy. Like, I feel like in the past, some top prospects have come up and, this is not just national specific, but this is across the league where teams kind of like shelter them a little bit. And because, they are young, they don't really know. with Dylan, I don't think the Nationals need to do that because he knows, he gets it. Like, and he's also just, at the baseline, a good person, a good dude. So I think he's special. He's definitely special on and off the field, and he's the type of guy you want to build your team around.
Yeah, and at this moment too, it's like, a year ago we're all talking about James Wood this, James Wood that, and now it's like Dylan Cruz. I want to see Dylan Cruz out there every day, and it's not to say James Wood,
Right.
he's got plenty of tools out there that Dylan Cruz just simply doesn't have, which is his power. Other than that, Dylan Cruz is kind of the full package that you want, and I think I'm blanking on his name now. The LSU head coach manager down with the baseball team there, he kind of said this before the draft that he was like, this is the prototypical guy that you want to build around. And I think now that we have him in the building, now that what we have seen him do in just a short amount of period here in DC, you're going to see a lot more from Dylan Cruz. This is someone who I believe is just kind of touching the surface of what his power could be. I really do believe that. I think this could be kind of someone who could have Anthony Rendon type of production at the plate. And honestly, like some people may say, well, he's still 21. And I'm like, yes, he is still 21, but this is the kind of promise that this guy has. A 70 grade hit tool. I mean, one of the best hit tools in all of baseball, right behind Jackson Holiday there. He's got a 60 grade power as well. And I think he's going to have a little bit more room to grow there. But with Dylan Cruz, I mean, just what has impressed you so far the most from what you have seen? Obviously, he struggled down in Double-A here. He's still 21, and he's still been impressive other than that.
Yeah, I mean, the bat-to-ball skills are elite. I mean, there's a reason he was the top hitting prospect in the draft, and it wasn't even close. I just think he just brings all the tools, right? Like you mentioned, so James Wood too. I mean, you mentioned James, but we're seeing him tap into power and not hit too much for average at Double-A. I'm giving Dylan some more time here so we can kind of get used to it. I know he got hit in the head and missed a game, but it seems okay right now. He played last night. But I think that Dylan has, overall the better tools. Now, James might be better at power and
he may be faster too. I don't know.
Like a gazelle out there. But yeah, I mean, but Dylan, I think, all things even, like he has the highest floor across the board of all 5 tools, like defensively, base running, average, power, speed, whatever it may be, arm. I think his floor is higher across the board than James. Now, James's ceiling might be higher in certain areas, but Dylan is just if you're creating a player in the show and you just want him to be you're just bumping him up. He's already an 88 everywhere. He's solid everywhere with the potential to be above 90 everywhere too. So he's just there's a reason he was, the top player in the country at the top program, and won the Golden Spikes Award. He's just, I think, just special. Like I said, special on the field and off the field. And looking at what I know, he struggled at Double-A, but looking at what Paul Skeens is doing in the Pirates organization. I know hindsight's 2020. We can Monday morning quarterback this thing easily, but I think the Nationals got lucky in that they didn't have to make that decision and they got Dylan Cruz, because I know Skeens has Cy Young potential, ace potential, but that's a guy playing every 5 days. Dylan Cruz could be your everyday center fielder for 150 plus games a year, and then in the playoffs, and I think that's way more valuable.
Same. And back at that draft, too, I mean, just the perfect scenario was for Paul Skeens, in my mind, the perfect scenario is have Paul Skeens go 1-1, then Dylan Cruz is sitting there at second overall. And honestly, I have a feeling, and this is just pure speculation, but I kind of have this feeling that Dylan Cruz probably wanted that to happen, because we all know Scott Boras and the relationship that he has with the Lerner family. So I've always kind of just felt like he was hoping for that result. We did see the rumors where he was going to be demanding $10 million in signing bonus money from the Pirates or whatever it may be. And that never came into fruition as well. Even he got less money than Paul Skeens, in which a lot of people were like, well, if Dylan Cruz is going to go 1-2, then Paul Skeens is going to get less money at number 1 overall. That did not happen. But I stand with you on that. You have to take the more impactful player. And when you have someone that can be in your lineup every single day and play center field for you and bat in the middle of your order, it's just way more valuable to take that, especially when you're kind of in this rebooting phase that the Nationals are in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that you look at this outfielding group in this minor league system, along with James Wood. I know Robert Hassel has been struggling as well, Elijah Gree, but Christian Vaquero finally making his pro debut stateside at Fredericksburg. I mean, they just got so much potential in that area of the field. And you've got an established guy in Lane Thomas and right now. So they can kind of slow pace this. It's sometimes I feel like in rebuilds, like you get there faster than you were planning, which is a good thing, but also like, are we actually ready for this? And sometimes it takes longer than you wanted. And you're like, I wish we were at this point at this point. I think this allows you, with all this talent in the minor league system, this allows the Nationals to move it at their own pace, assuming everything goes the way that we expect it. Everyone stays healthy, production continues to go up. The Nationals can kind of control a little bit more how fast they want to go with this rebuild. Because, like I said, if they're expecting to next year be in the playoff contention, you get to July, trade on approaching, you're seeing all these guys get better. You're seeing where the team is. I mean, I keep making this comparison. Look what the Orioles did last year. Midway through the season, they were doing way better than they thought, and they decided to go for it while also not giving up a lot of top prospects, and they almost made it. So the Nationals can kind of make that kind of the same decision because you have so many guys like Cruz, like Wood, like Hassel, like Brady House, like Elijah Green and Christian Vaquero, hopefully making improvements next year. I mean, you just got so much more depth than anyone else right now, or than most teams have right now, and that kind of allows you to control your own pace.
Bobby, it's been a fun conversation today, man. I really appreciate the time, and obviously talking all the Nats stuff and as well as some Orioles talk as well. We love it here. We love some baseball. And of course, you guys can catch Bobby on Twitter at Bobby_Blanco, and as well as catch his blogs and his articles over at MASNsports.com. I almost said MASNsports.com. Jeez, Bobby, it's early in the morning, man. It's 11:30.
A long weekend of baseball too. It's a holiday weekend too. We got to get going.
Holiday weekend, man. Labor Day weekend, baby. One last kick of summer here. And then, of course, it is already September. So fall is in the air. Yeah, Bobby, I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, anytime, Ryan. Literally anytime. Just give me a shout. Thanks for having me.
No problem, everybody. We'll catch everyone on the flip side. See the Nationals and the Marlins this weekend. We'll talk about it on Monday.